Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the side event titled Catalyzing Global Offshore Wind Growth Through Strategic Partnerships, organized together with the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. We will start shortly. There is a minor delay in the plenary hall, but we will start shortly the sessions together. And thank you again for coming today. Good afternoon again, and thank you for joining us today during the side event on behalf of the Global Offshore Wind Alliance and its co-founders. We are extremely happy to have an exciting discussion today on catalyzing global offshore wind growth through strategic partnerships. We are delighted today to have a series of exciting engagement, including announcement about new memberships and also documenting the progress of the alliance so far. We'll start immediately with the high-level introductory remarks by the GOA co-founders. And I'd like to call to Mr. Ole Tonke, the Undersecretary for Development Policy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everybody who has come here. We were just discussing up here that it seems we are very, very few for this event, but we are actually more or less who we are supposed to be. It's just the room that is a bit too large for this crowd. So had we been in a small, nice room, it would look very, very different from the outside. But it's great to see you all. And thanks a lot for your participation in this event, which comes at a time where it's been now 2 years since we actually launched the GOVA at COP27 between Denmark, IRENA, and GWEC, and this GOVA alliance has really grown ever since. The aim, of course, as everybody knows, is to accelerate energy transition and to inspire climate action to drive down the cost of fossil fuel. Looking at what's going on at the world today, this is more important than ever. All the news on the climate is... my experience is that whenever I meet some of the scientists who are doing all the investigations on this, their latest figures are worse than what they expected a year ago. That's always what they're saying. And now we had a year with more than 1.5 degree warming, which is way earlier than expected again. But also we are living in a world with a lot of geopolitical unrest for the time being. And there's a lot of focus on the energy prices at a global level and making sure that we can drive down energy prices as such. At the same time, at COP28, we had the decision of phasing out of fossil fuel. It was very clear in the text there, and we also there was the decision to triple renewable energy before 2030, and before 2030 is actually in 5 years' time. So basically, that almost needs to be in the pipeline already now if we are to succeed on tripling renewable energy before 2030. So all hands on deck if we are to achieve this, and we have the technology proven. Offshore energy is and can be a key factor in this, but it's not happening at the pace that we would love to see it. So we need to do more to drive this agenda forward. And this is why, for me, the GOVA Alliance is actually more relevant than ever. And we have more work in front of us than we have ever had for us as an alliance. And again, what is for me really important is this, that we bring together private sector, public sector, all the value chain to unlock this potential. And the topic for today about catalyzing global offshore wind growth, I mean, through strategic partnership says it all. So it's very, very pertinent as such. We are around 30 members and growing right now. I hope more will come on this topic. later today. We have achieved philanthropic funding for GOVA now, so we have actually something to build upon. There's a 3-year plan and a steering group to move things forward. Yesterday we had a great dinner talking about what should be in the pipeline, what opportunities, what do we need to do in the next coming year, which will be a crunch year also for offshore wind. So there's a lot of ideas and potential in the pipeline on this. And for us, what is really important is that GOVA is the platform that can find these practical solutions and keep this dialogue going between private and public sector and value chain companies to really drive this forward and get offshore energy to a scale. So I think I'll leave it at that and say thank you for everybody for joining us today, and really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Undersecretary, for those welcoming remarks. We'd like now to call Dr. Ronald Roche, the Director of the ARENA Innovation and Technology Center, for its introductory remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much, Mr. Tonke. It is my pleasure to address this GOA event, catalyzing the global offshore wind growth through strategic partnership. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to address you today, this critical element of the global energy transition, the accelerated deployment of offshore wind energy. ARENA recognizes the transformative potential of offshore wind and its crucial role in achieving sustainable energy future. This event today focuses on catalyzing global offshore wind growth through strategic partnerships, underscores the collaborative spirit needed to achieve this success. The global energy landscape, as you know, is undergoing a profound shift. The need to decarbonize our energy system is clear. Climate change impacts are intensifying, as we can see every day, and energy security is of utmost importance. Offshore wind energy offers a compelling solution for this, providing clean, reliable, and increasingly cost-competitive energy source. However, to realize its full potential requires a concerted action and a coordinated global effort, which we try to address to the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. Through our work on tracking the United Arab Emirates consensus, we continue to provide a comprehensive roadmap for achieving a sustainable energy future aligned with the Paris Agreement. Our World Energy Transition Outlooks outlines a pathway to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees and reach net zero CO2 emission by the mid of this century. Offshore wind is, in our scenarios and in our plans here, a cornerstone of this vision, contributing significantly to the required expansion of the renewable energy capacity. Strategic partnerships are very essential to realize the WITO's ambition goals, particularly by empowering emerging markets, where a lot more needs to happen with offshore wind, but also fostering the international collaboration, which happens through this Global Offshore Wind Alliance, which was founded by Denmark, ARENA, and also the Global Wind Energy Council to embody this collaborative spirit. GOA has rapidly grown, which is nice to acknowledge here. We have over 30 members, including national government, industry leaders, and other international organizations. Today, we celebrate the addition of new countries joining this alliance. These nations exemplify the potential of offshore wind to transform energy systems and enhance resilience, and their participation enriches Goa's diverse membership. While the growth of offshore wind sector is already encouraging and it has advanced since we have started to implement Goa with a 75 gigawatt of operational capacity globally, according to the latest GWAC report. We must significantly accelerate deployment to meet our climate goal. GWAC projects a potential capacity of realistic 487 gigawatt by 2033. But achieving this requires to overcome barriers and to collaborate. IRENA, even in its veto, outlines the potential for offshore wind of 2,500 gigawatt by 2050. One crucial barrier is access to finance, particularly in emerging markets. Innovative finance mechanisms such as de-risking instruments, blended finance, and public-private partnerships are essential to mobilize the necessary investments. IRENA is committed to working with partners to develop and implement these solutions together. Equally important is the sharing of knowledge, technology, and best practices. Developed countries with established offshore wind industry have a vital role to play in supporting emerging market. Capacity building initiatives and technology transfer are essential to fostering a just and equitable energy transition. Robust regulatory frameworks are also crucial for sustainable offshore wind development. Clear and consistent policies adapted to national contexts provide the necessary foundation for investments and innovation, and international harmonization of standards can further facilitate the growth and reduce the costs. As we heard this morning in a meeting of the Global Planning Coalition, it has been said, but also all regulation, all tools, all planning doesn't help if we don't walk the talk. So that means we also have to do the permitting and bring forward the projects, which is also essential, and where administration of governments is required to take steps to do the permitting very fast. We also must prioritize the positive social and environmental outcomes of offshore wind development. Creating jobs, stimulating local economies, and protecting marine ecosystems are essential considerations. IRENA is committed to ensuring that the transition to a sustainable energy future is inclusive and benefits all stakeholders. The discussion at COP29 highlighted the very uneven progress in the different renewable energy sector, while solar PV, and we discussed it yesterday at the dinner that has been mentioned, while solar PV deployment is advancing rapidly and is self-running, offshore wind requires targeted support to accelerate its growth and trajectory. So offshore winds needs attention and needs push to get forward because the technology is so much more complex. This Goa event provides a valuable platform to address these challenges, and also we try to identify solutions here for these challenges. I commend the governments and organizations that have joined Goa and urge others to join also this growing alliance. Together we can unlock the full potential of offshore wind energy and build a sustainable energy future for all. I look forward to a productive discussion and concrete action that will drive the global offshore wind revolution forward. Only by working together we achieve the ambitious goals of the UAE consensus and a secure and cleaner, more prosperous future for generations to come. I would like to thank you, and I stop here. Thank you very much. Back to Simon.
Thank you, Roland, for your remarks. Now the turn to Ben Backwell, the CEO of the Global Wind Energy Council.
Okay, thank you, and good morning and welcome everyone to this Goa meeting. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Director General Dieter, thank you for joining us, and all the other representatives here from different countries. As Roland said, the offshore wind revolution is a really important part of the energy transition, and I think this is being understood more and more. The simple fact is that solar PV capacity factors are about a quarter in Europe of what offshore wind capacity factors are, and that varies in different places. And obviously, sunnier places you have higher solar PV factors, but as Bloomberg New Energy Finance recently pointed out in an article that was called "The World Has a Wind Problem," if you try and do the energy transition with mainly solar, you're not talking about the 11 terawatts of power that IRENA, or 11.3 or 11.4 terawatts of power that IRENA estimates is necessary for the tripling. You're talking about an absolutely order of magnitude higher than that. So we need to be really serious about this. The scenarios for the energy transition are based on a mix of technologies, and a healthy mix, mainly solar PV and wind. But if wind is not performing and is not installing, it throws into question really all those scenarios and targets. So I really want to focus people's minds on that. Now, there's going to be a lot of negative headlines out there in the next couple of months about offshore wind. And there's going to be a lot of negative headlines out there about renewable energy in general and about the transition. And we should be prepared for that. There's going to be a lot of noise, and there's going to be a lot of disinformation spread through social media and traditional media. And we just need to be prepared for that. It's going to happen, and it will happen for a little while. And there are people who are determined to slow down the energy transition by creating a lot of noise and distraction. We need to move through that, and we need to stick to our mission and really continue our work, our serious work, as policymakers and as industry participants and as investors and as civil society organizations and as think tanks and organizations. We need to continue with our work. We need to be very serious, and we need to stay focused on our mission, which is to get the tripling and the energy transition on track as quickly as possible through the revised NDCs and through a number of measures to accelerate progress. And none of these areas is more striking than offshore wind. The ambition for offshore wind is huge, and the interest that we're seeing from countries continues to be very, very strong. So we continue to have countries approaching Goa. We have many, many countries who are implementing legislation and regulation, who are trying to hold auctions. So the interest is very strong, and there's a reason for that. The economic fundamentals are extremely strong, and the fundamentals in terms of the social and economic impact and benefits of offshore wind are extremely strong, and that's why people are interested in this. So let's focus on that and what we need to do to then realize this potential. It's really, really important that we communicate. And last night at a dinner with my Danish colleagues, we were talking about running a global communications campaign for offshore wind, just to really reinforce some of the facts around the economics and the industry and see how we do that. But it's also very, very important that we take practical actions to help the countries that approach Goa. There's a whole number of countries which are taking measures right now to work through the regulatory problems and challenges successfully, actually, in many, many cases. There are countries which are holding successful auctions around the world, from South Korea to Japan, the Philippines that's going to hold its first auction later this year, and so on. So there's many countries which are working through the challenges and are implementing their frameworks. And we need to be prepared as an international community around offshore wind to be able to provide really practical help in those situations. And like I said, there's a lot of good momentum which we need to turn into actions. I'd actually like to mention Brazil. Mariana from the ministry has just joined us. Brazil passed its offshore wind law a week ago, and the president signed the law on Friday. Again, a lot of hard work has got into that from the ministry and from other stakeholders in Brazil over 2 or 3 years. So again, huge potential there and huge momentum, we hope there as well. So this is by no means a gloomy story. And then maybe just to finish, I mean, there are some issues which have come really clearly into focus over the last year, and many of which we discussed in GOA meetings, for instance, the GOA finance meeting in New York during the New York Climate Week in September. It's clear there needs to be a better balance of risk sharing between the private sector and governments, and I think that's been shown through the different experiences in auctioning over the last couple of years. Right, there needs to be a situation where people feel that the level of risk is adequate to the level of investment, and I know that governments are moving to address this question very, very quickly. There needs to be action on financing for developing countries where there is, where there are not huge state resources that can be thrown at this. So we need to close gaps between the very early prices for offshore wind in new countries and what those costs and prices will then decline to in the long term. And some of that is around financing grid and those kind of things. And those are practical things that we need to do in short order. So there's a lot of work for GOA to do. I really want this to be the year of action for GOA. The Secretariat, as Ollie said, has been set up now, and we're ready to be more hands-on and provide more resource. So it's game on, and let's stay focused on what we need to do. Hand it back to you, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. And we like to actually, before welcoming intervention for incoming new members, we wanted to hear from the European Commission through Ms. Dieter Jorgensen, the Director General for Energy at the European Commission, on highlighting the pivotal role of collaboration, fostering effort to strengthening the role of working between developed nations and developing countries. Dieter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to GOA for the excellent work to promote wind energy globally, an absolutely necessary part of the energy transition and of energy access. We see that the scale we need in terms of renewable energy will only happen if we also use our maritime basins, and if we use offshore wind, we simply get into a different scale, a different number of gigawatts, and that will help us generate the green electricity that we need. Within the European Union, we have long recognized, we've seen the value of offshore wind in achieving these objectives and targets. We see that in terms of access to energy, the electricity generation. We see it in terms of our energy security. It is an alternative to imported fossil molecules, to be very, very clear. And we see that also as an economic security case. There is a strong interest in building strong value chains, secure supply chains in a diversified economy and a diversified energy system. So for the European Commission and the European Union as a whole, offshore wind is really part of the broader agenda towards climate neutrality, towards economic security, towards competitiveness and the broader security agenda. Now, obviously, the access to the capacity for offshore wind differs depending on where you are. Some of the sea basins, we have 5 sea basins in the European Union, and some of them are very advanced in the build-out and cooperation of offshore wind, whereas others are still more tentative and working on this. But I think it's fair to say that in the North Sea, there's really a significant build-out, and others are following as well. It is interesting to see how much has been installed. We had 20 gigawatt in the European Union as a whole last year. And we see European Union member states signing up to or committing to significantly increased ambitions for the deployment of offshore, and in doing that, aligning with the European regulatory framework, the clarification we have sought to create on hybrid schemes, on investments and infrastructure that go beyond one European member state or one European country, so that we can share that energy and share the investment as much as possible. We now have targets of almost 90 gigawatt for 2030, so quite a significant increase over the coming 5 years at a European level, and that will require us to make significant investments and really accelerate the work we're doing, whether that is on permitting and on planning, on the work on the different types of use of the sea basins. And then we have even higher targets, of course, for 2040 and 2050. But achieving those later targets, of course, requires us to first meet the 2030 targets. Offshore wind started as a European story, but it is not only a European story, it is very much a global story, and we see other parts of the world, other parts of the ocean that are investing in offshore wind for the same reason that we've been doing that in Europe. I think it's important in that context for all of us collectively to look at the energy transition and the energy build-out, not just as a question of deployment and the generation of electrons or the transport of these electrons from the sea basin into where they are used in our energy system, but really look at it more as an energy system as a whole, including the value chains that will allow us to build out offshore wind in this case, but everything related to it, from the critical minerals to the processing of the minerals, to the manufacturing, to the technologies, the innovation, the research that is needed, because only if we look at it in this broader energy system context will we be able to build energy systems that are secure and able to together create energy systems where all countries across the world can participate and can benefit from the energy itself, from the electricity that is generated, but also benefit from the manufacturing and the innovation and the technologies that become part of those energy systems. So more than deployment, more than electrons, it really is about the development of these sectors and of the value chains that are there. I think that the GOA partnership is an important tool to help achieve those objectives. It gives us a place to enhance our cooperation on a number of the necessary components of that energy system. One of the key drivers in the European Union is the fact that we have a common European market for energy, an energy union, but also that we have a common regulatory framework that covers all of the energy union and that helps drive the investments by giving clarity around targets and around the regulatory requirements. We have a regulation on trans-European networks, and we have a renewable energy directive. We have a recently revised electricity market design, and that all of them help give clarity to if you invest in the European Union, if you invest in offshore wind, these are the conditions, and this will not change. The course of direction is clear, the investment framework is clear, it's not going to change, we're not going to turn around. This is set at the level of our leaders and will remain there. One of the challenges we've seen, and that's my second point again, is the competitiveness in manufacturing and the supply chains. I think we've all seen globally how some of the supply chains have become increasingly concentrated among just a few providers, and that can be at all stages, again, at the level of commodity or commodity processing, raw material processing, or at the level of manufacturing of specific technologies or specific components, whether it is magnets or other parts of it. We have seen also in the European Union some challenges in maintaining and strengthening the manufacturing capacity. We have strong manufacturing capacity, but we are really stepping up to make sure that we strengthen that. And again, it is a question of the energy systems, of the economic security, of the energy security, all of it belonging together. So significant efforts to build more resilient and robust value chains and supply chains in the European Union. But we know in the European Union that we can only have resilient and robust supply chains if those supply chains are shared with partners. The resilience does not come from doing everything on our own. The resilience comes from building strong trade and investment partnerships with countries and partners from across the world. So an important aspect of that you don't need to be entirely self-reliant in order to be resilient. The resilience comes from partnership and cooperation. We then have, and that's my third point, I think a challenge that is a global challenge in relation to investments into renewable and offshore in particular, that we see investments and access to finance as having slowed down. We see that the global economic, the macroeconomic environment, the geopolitical environment is not conducive to finance and to access to finance and for investments. And so we really have been looking at how do we counterbalance, how do we provide some guarantees, how do we de-risk in a risky global context. We've been working very, very closely with the European Investment Bank on counter guarantees that was set up last year to both offshore and onshore projects, and it is just one example of a financial instrument to de-risk. We see de-risking primarily as something we can do within the market with, again, predictable regulation, clear targets, cooperative frameworks, power purchasing agreements. There are a lot of things that can be done to de-risk, but if there is a residual risk, if you will, after those interventions, well, then you need financial instruments to de-risk, and that's where the counter guarantee scheme that has been set up with the European Investment Bank is a good example of what can be done. Another element of de-risking is, of course, to make sure that the incentives are right. We have seen that some of the large offshore projects that have been planned have actually failed to attract the attention from project developers that we had hoped they would attract. And we need to make sure that we get the balance right in terms of cost benefit and the attractiveness of the projects. And because the global environment, the cost of capital has changed, the uncertainties again, we do need to make sure that our projects and our auctions and the way we develop this, that they align with the reality that is there also in terms of what is the price, what is the cost, and what are the benefits. Looking at it beyond the European Union, we need to make sure that we have the right financing mechanisms, and we need to look at innovative financing instruments to get there. The levels of capital that will be needed are significant, and we can see once again that while the private capital is out there, it is currently not quite willing to go where we need it to go for the transition and access to energy. And so we need to make sure that we have the right financing mechanisms to help that happen. So we will continue in the European Union on these efforts. We hope that some of the lessons learned in Europe and some of the expertise built over these last decades can also help others pursue the path towards offshore wind energy if that fits into their plans, but really as a necessary part of getting access to green energy and to do it at a scale that is necessary for part of the transition. Globally, we have of course done that by spearheading the objective, the commitment to triple renewable energy by 2030 at COP28. We were leading that together with the United Arab Emirates as the COP presidency, but also now in the Global Energy Transition Forum to bring the political momentum and impetus to the follow-up work to COP28 tripling and doubling agenda. Our president has announced it recently, and we'll be discussing that at Davos in just a few weeks' time. So a lot of work to make it happen, but it is clear that we need offshore wind to achieve the tripling of renewables and then the further targets that we have set ourselves for 2030, 2040, and beyond that. So that's the European perspective on offshore wind. Thank you very much again for setting up this event and for inviting us.
Thank you, Ms. Yes. Applause. Thank you, Ms. Jørgensen, for articulating the European vision for enhanced international collaboration, but also opportunities we heard on mutual support and capacity building. And we know you have a challenging schedule today with many multilateral discussions, so very much grateful for you to come today at this event. I'd like now to turn to my colleague, Ms. Hanne Gjertsid, Chief Advisor at the International Department of the Ministry of Energy, Climate and Utilities of Denmark, to moderate the next session on welcoming welcoming new members. Hanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Simon. Yes, we are now really delighted that we will now hear the announcements from our new members. We are today more than 30 members of GOVA, of which more than 20 are from national or subnational governments. But today we have 3 incoming members amongst us, and we will be really keen to hear your perspectives, both on the motivation for joining GOVA, but of course, most importantly, also your perspectives on and the insights in your country's plans and interest in offshore wind. So first, I would like to call the Honourable Minister Thomas Malcolm Opa, Minister for Petroleum and Energy from Papua New Guinea. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to join GOA and be on this panel. Papua New Guinea's expansive coastline offers significant offshore wind potential, but infrastructure limitations and financing hurdles remain challenging. Which type of strategic partnerships, from technical assistance to blended finance? Sorry, this is the question that I've been given. PNG has significant potential in offshore wind energy due to its geographical location, the vast coastline and favorable wind conditions in certain areas. PNG has untapped potential for offshore wind, and particularly in its coastline and island regions, further resource assessments and feasibility studies are needed to determine exact sites and realistic power outputs. With appropriate investment, policy support, and technology adaptation, offshore wind could potentially contribute to PNG's energy mix. Offshore wind potential of wind speeds in offshore areas of PNG typically range between 6 miles per second to 8 miles at 100 meters above sea level. This range is sufficient for modern wind turbines to generate electricity efficiently. Offshore wind technology collaboration on research and development, including feasibility studies, would be immediately needed by PNG. The PNG government will do its part to ensure necessary legislative and policy frameworks are in place to support investments in OSW, including licensing regulation. In comparison with other renewable energy potential, where PNG hydro potential is 20 gigawatts and geothermal at 30 gigawatts. Wind is huge, with the potential of 300 gigawatts in our country, both onshore and offshore. PNG has untapped potential in offshore wind energy, particularly as floating wind technology becomes more viable for regions with deep waters. While significant barriers exist, targeted investments in infrastructure, capacity building, and policy frameworks could enable PNG to harness this resource as part of its broader energy transition and climate resilience strategy. GOA provides an opportunity for Papua New Guinea to learn from other countries, but also foster cooperation and collaboration in research and development, technology transfer, capacity building, and other support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, and we look really forward to actually benefiting from your contribution in the future work of GOA. So welcome, a warm welcome to you. I would now like to turn to Malta and Her Excellency Ms. Maria Camilleri Calleja, who is the permanent representative to IRENA and the Ambassador of Malta. Your Excellency, the floor is yours, and we look forward to your perspectives.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, colleagues. I wish to express, first of all, my heartfelt appreciation to the Global Offshore Wind Alliance for considering Malta's interest to join this initiative and for having us here today. Malta stands at a pivotal moment in its journey towards sustainable decarbonized future. With limited land space and the challenges posed by our geographical location, Malta is strategically turning to its expansive offshore resource to harness the potential of renewable energy, recognizing the need for large-scale offshore wind energy projects. The Government of Malta has focused on leveraging our exclusive economic zone, an area rich in untapped potential. Our journey started in 2022, when the government assessed the viability of offshore projects. A subsequent consultation revealed overwhelming interest from investors, particularly for renewable energy initiatives. This response highlighted the significant appetite for investment in Malta's offshore energy sector, a key element in the nation's broader commitment to sustainability. Malta's ambitious renewable energy goals are clearly outlined in our National Low Carbon Development Strategy and the National Energy and Climate Plan of Malta. Our focus is on advancing these objectives through development of offshore renewables, recognizing that our spatial constraints on land demand a bold and innovative approach. In August 2023, the government published a draft national policy for the deployment of offshore renewable energy, providing a clear and forward-thinking framework for the implementation of these projects beyond our territorial waters. By October 2024, this policy was finalized, ensuring a technology-neutral approach that fosters innovation while securing our energy future. A strategic environmental assessment was carried out to examine the potential impacts of this policy. This rigorous process took into account a wide range of factors, including air quality, climate change, maritime activities, and transportation. This assessment identified 6 areas within our exclusive economic zone, which, after thorough analysis of environmental constraints, marine traffic, seabed characteristics, and economic feasibility, emerged as the most suitable for offshore renewable energy projects. 2 of these, approximately 190 square kilometers and 140 square kilometers in size, were selected for future investigation. In August 2024, a geophysical marine survey in these identified zones was initiated. The survey provides crucial data on the seabed, bathymetry, and potential man-made features, laying the foundation for the future deployment of offshore wind farms and de-risking of investment. This effort is part of a broader vision to bolster Malta's green energy transition. The government has already launched a public call for the development of an offshore floating wind farm in these identified areas situated beyond 12 nautical miles with a capacity of 300 megawatts, equating to nearly 1/3 of Malta's current electricity consumption. This initiative will complement our existing onshore solar farms, as well as ongoing investments in a second interconnection with mainland Europe, additional grid reinforcement, and battery energy storage. In December 2024, last month, Malta entered into an EU non-binding agreement on goals for offshore renewable generation in 2050 for 350 megawatts capacity, with intermediate steps in 2040 and 2030 of 350 megawatts and 50 megawatts respectively. By joining the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, Malta aims to demonstrate its unwavering commitment to the global transition to offshore renewable energy. This membership reflects our ambition to actively contribute to the international push for clean, sustainable energy solutions. In addition to reinforcing this commitment, Malta recognizes the immense value of Goa Knowledge Hub. Access to dedicated knowledge and expertise sharing on offshore wind technology will be invaluable as we continue to develop our own offshore wind initiatives. Finally, by enabling partnerships with the offshore wind industry, Malta hopes to leverage the Goa to promote its open call for the development of its first offshore floating wind farm. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ambassador. Very, very interesting also to hear from you, and we look forward to the collaboration. I would like now to turn to our last incoming member, Trinidad and Tobago, and Mrs. Sheena Gosin. I hope I pronounced it correctly, who joins us from the Energy International Relations and Affairs, who is Energy International Relations and Affairs Advisor to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. All protocol observed. It is my pleasure to participate in today's event. On behalf of the government of Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to the Global Offshore Wind Alliance for providing this opportunity for us to share our sustainability agenda and responding favorably to our expressed interest to be part of this alliance. The energy transition is not a singular journey as the world continues to be heavily reliant on fossil fuels. As countries continue to take collective stock of their actions, the resolution is clear. There must be acceleration of global efforts towards climate mitigation agendas. The Caribbean region is no exception. The region relies on petroleum products as a source of approximately 87% of primary energy consumption. As a result, oil importer countries in the Caribbean have reported of spending 15% of annual GDP on fuel imports. This heavy dependence on imported fossil fuels contributes to the region's high cost of doing business, increases its vulnerability to external sector shocks, and constrains economic growth and competitiveness across most Caribbean economies. As developing nations, we also bear the brunt of climate change impacts, despite contributing minimally to global emissions. We continue to experience increased frequency and intensity of natural disasters, including droughts, floods, and hurricanes, which further strain our financial resources. To treat with the aftermath of these disasters requires the diversion of funds from development projects, including energy and climate mitigation. The journey towards sustainable energy in the Caribbean is underway. But to date, the region's energy transition has been slow and incremental. To gain momentum requires the dedication and collaboration of individuals, organizations, and governments. Through investments, partnerships, and a shared commitment to resilience and diversity, the region can overcome its energy challenges. Trinidad and Tobago lies at the median in relation to the progress made by countries in transitioning their energy systems. As a small island developing state, we are constantly exposed to the negative impacts associated with climate change. We have been fortunate to be able to provide affordable, secure energy supplies and maintain resilient energy systems for our citizens through the monetization of our natural resources. However, as we continue to monetize the resources, we remain keenly aware of our responsibility to mitigating the effects of global warming. It is with this recognition that the government in its 2030 vision placed the environment at the forefront of social and economic development and established short, medium, and long-term goals aimed at achieving a balance between the environment and social and economic development. Trinidad and Tobago has therefore agreed to decreasing its greenhouse gas emissions in its power generation, transportation, and industrial sectors. Our NDCs aim to reduce emissions from these three sectors by 15% and from business as usual by 2030, which in absolute terms is equivalent to 103 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. The cost of this exercise is estimated to be US $2 billion and includes a level of international financing. Trinidad and Tobago is supporting the adoption of renewable energy targets, spearheading climate resilient projects, and playing a pivotal role in shaping our regional energy policies. In this regard, we have adopted a comprehensive approach to activities aimed at emission mitigation within our entire energy value chain. Accordingly, in 2025, we will see the completion and commissioning of the single largest solar plant in the English-speaking Caribbean with an installed capacity of 92.2 megawatts. As we look to the future, Trinidad and Tobago is poised to become a leader in the transformative technology known as green hydrogen as part of its energy transition. At present in country, hydrogen is produced from natural gas, and current usage in the production of ammonia and methanol plants is estimated at 2.42 to 3.64 million metric tons per annum. We are in the process of leveraging our gas infrastructure to establish a pilot project demonstrating the visible end-use applications of green hydrogen. In this regard, the government is also actioning what is known as Horizon 1 of our hydrogen roadmap, which will set the foundation for a viable green hydrogen economy. Offshore wind has been identified as the potential driver for the development of this green hydrogen economy. Notably, in 2023, we successfully partnered with the European Union to determine the feasibility of wind deployment in Trinidad and Tobago through initial assessments of onshore and offshore sites. The study identified prospective sites which are capable of producing 2 gigawatts of installed wind power by 2035. Based on the study, and with further EU support, in November 2024, we initiated a wind resource assessment program to define the onshore wind zones for Trinidad and Tobago. The outcome of this program and the country's power requirement will form the basis of a future request for proposals for new generating capacity to attain our goal of 30% of RE power generation by 2030. In 2024, the Honorable Minister of Energy and Energy Industries of Trinidad and Tobago spearheaded the formation of the Cabinet-appointed Wind Energy Steering Committee for Trinidad and Tobago. This committee is tasked with planning the future of wind generation for the country. In this regard, the committee is currently pursuing future financial and technical assistance options for offshore RAP and accompanying studies. No government or organization can solve climate change alone. The sector grapples with multifaceted challenges that are both urgent and complex, which also require navigating intricate regulatory environments. The scale of the transition requires cross-sector partnerships, bringing together technical expertise and resources. It is with this recognition we have expressed interest in joining GOA. GOA also provides a conduit for industry collaboration, which is essential to break down barriers and drive systematic change through innovation in the field of wind energy. In closing, the energy transition is not solely about technological advancements. It requires a comprehensive and inclusive approach that GOA represents. The energy transition is no longer a choice, it is a necessity. It presents us with an unparalleled opportunity to redefine our relationship with the environment, address climate change, and create a more equitable and prosperous future for all. However, only through cooperation and solidarity can we overcome challenges associated with the transition and secure our future. Together, we can turn ideas into actions and forge a brighter, cleaner, and more prosperous future for ourselves and future generations. Trinidad and Tobago looks forward to this future and welcomes all the support GOA can offer. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for those perspectives. We are really, really happy to welcome you all three of you. You're all island states, and you will provide an important addition to GOA. So let's just all give you a warm welcome.
Thank you, Hannah. I'd like to now hand over to Ms. Rebecca William, the Deputy CEO of the Global Wind Energy Council, for the panel discussion.
Hello, everyone. I think we promised in the agenda that we would give you a dynamic panel discussion. You'll have to use your imagination a bit because everyone is spread throughout the room here. But we have got some targeted questions here for our next panelists, and we're really looking forward to getting into that conversation. We're going to kick off with Her Excellency Ms. Tina van der Straten, Minister of Energy and Economy for Belgium, who's been a long-standing supporter of the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. So thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. Ms. van der Straten, if I can ask you, how do you feel that Belgium's experience with regional cooperation and the regulatory framework that you have put in place can benefit other GOA members? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you first and foremost to Irena to host this panel with GOA members, and welcome to Malta, Trinidad, Tobago, and Papua New Guinea in this very specific format, which is about sharing expertise, and I would be happy to give an insight from Belgium. Belgium is a small country situated in the European Union, but Dieter Jurgensen was talking about. We only have 67 kilometers of coastline, but we are, as of today, the second country worldwide with regards to offshore wind capacity per capita. And so we have a very small part of the North Sea in which we are obliged to build very densely because we are a very energy-intensive country. With regard to some insights, I would like to start to say that maybe we should do a better job in talking about offshore wind and not necessarily to express offshore wind, to talk about offshore wind. See, offshore wind, it is not a goal in itself, but a means to an end. So it is not only about capacity that we want to build in a specific time frame, but it's about electricity supplied, affordable electricity to people or to industries who need electricity. And maybe we should reframe our targets and not specifically talk about, and I do this myself, so this is not, I'm not finger pointing anyone, because I'm also an energy minister that is the whole time saying that I want to triple my offshore wind capacity in Belgium. But maybe we should reframe or talk more about tripling offshore wind in Belgium means produce electricity for all Belgian households. Of course, this differs from country to country. If you're, for example, living in Denmark, and excuse me for using European examples, but I come from Europe, so these examples I know best. If you live in Denmark, for example, you don't need offshore wind to supply in local electricity demand, because that is already entirely covered and even by onshore wind, by renewable energy sources. But Denmark has neighbors who are in need for green electricity, for example, Belgium. And so, yes, I'm sorry to, this is because we have a long-standing partnership also with Denmark. And so we need to talk about offshore wind as in affordable electricity that is needed to provide in energy security for households or to provide for electricity for keeping or developing industries in different countries. And so what is an important local benefit needs to be defined locally. And so when we defined our support mechanism, we put policy objectives first, front and center. And that was that if we produce electricity in the North Sea, we want this electricity also to go to households and not only to, for example, steel factories that we also have in Belgium. And also, because the North Sea is also a protected sea basin, we wanted our infrastructure to benefit from nature. And that's why we are building nature inclusively. And so, to deliver on offshore wind in a specific time frame, which was the guiding question, it is very important to lay out these policy objectives from the beginning. And I have witnessed and experienced myself that if you do this, your wind industry is a partner. Because they know also, of course, that if you design a policy mechanism that has broad public support, that in the end they can build wind turbines. So when putting out as an objective that we wanted energy communities to participate in our offshore wind project, it did not have any opposition from the wind industry. On the contrary. So please, as a policymaker, that would be my experience from Belgium, don't be afraid by doing this. Don't be afraid by doing this, because in the end, it's the industry that will help to deliver on this specific policy outcomes, and it will help from a political point of view to defend these policies. Second, planning is key. Not only regional planning, not only planning in your own sea basin, not only planning in who is doing when what, but also a very specific targeted approach. I used to say in Belgium that there is nothing wrong with baby steps, as long as you set many in the right direction. So it's maybe better to auction a gigawatt at a time than to put a far-fetched target, which is huge, but farther away. So we want to do 3.5 gigawatt by 2030, but we do it in 3 times. 700 megawatt, 1.5, 1.5. And it is my experience, but I stand to be corrected by the wind industry here also around the table. It is my experience that this gives and provides also some stability. Because what is hindering us is the boom and bust in the wind industry sector. So we can provide stability and also more certainty to the supply chain if we tell them this is our trajectory from year to year to year. And it's better to have this intermediate approach and not to have a huge target further in time. And then my last topic would be that if you have a specific, in your specific policy, in your specific country, and when you have defined what you want to achieve, whether it is protection of fisheries or electrify coastal communities, whatever, provide also support to developers in helping them how to achieve this. For example, when we defined that we wanted to be energy communities as part, as also co-owners of wind industry, we also provided support that these different stakeholders talk to each other. We put wind industries in contact with our energy communities, for example. So do not leave the wind industry with your policy objective and then that they manage their business, but help them along the way to come together. So all in all, although the challenges are big and sometimes seem difficult to achieve, it's not different from building a house. It's not different when you do a renovation at home. If you renovate your home, you see how you want your home to be, and then you have to tackle every problem as it comes. You will also, if you do your renovation, you will also begin somewhere and not begin at every part at the same time. And I think it's this approach, boots on the ground, that will benefit in general to deliver on these different targets. I didn't mention grid components, and I will not take any more time. But of course, in order to electrify households and industries, we also need the grid to function. And I think this is maybe one of the biggest areas to work in, so that wind turbines are not sitting idle.
Thank you so much for those comments. I just want to let the rest of the speakers know that the IRENA logistics team are quite frightening, and they will at some point throw us out of the room if we don't keep to time enough. So I just want to remind speakers to be brief. I want to now go to Ms. Mariana Espice, who's the Special Advisor to the Ministry of Mines and Energy Brazil, who brings us, I think, some good news. Mariana.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and it is a pleasure to be here talking on behalf of the Brazilian government and the Brazilian Ministry of Mines and Energy. Yes, we do. Finally, after a long journey, at least as a follow-up since 2019, we have the approval of a national law that will permit and consider seabed leases for offshore wind in Brazil. And this is really, really a landmark for us, a milestone that we would like to share with you all. And Brazil is a continental country. We have a long coast. We have mapped that Brazil has a technical potential for offshore wind bigger than 1,200 gigawatts. And we really see this as a new opportunity for our country, as we can say that it might bring more than 500,000 jobs to our country until 2050, and might bring an additional value to our economy of 900 billion reais. So I feel like we are in a moment where this law will unleash the potential that we have. And it is a process of an intense debate, intense negotiations with the Congress, the Brazilian Congress, and also industry stakeholders that are interested on developing their activities in Brazil. And we are going to work across 2025, to have a working group designing the additional regulations, the complementary regulations to the law, which will bring more clarity, a safe environment for entrepreneurs to bring their investments, to make sure which are the steps that should be taken and followed by them. And we believe that this might be quite a nice opportunity for the more than 100 offshore wind projects that are now in a proposition to the environmental agency in Brazil to finally bring up their final investments decisions. All these 103 offshore wind projects in Brazil will unlock about 240 gigawatts of installed capacity for offshore wind in our country. And we would like to reinforce that, for example, we have our national oil and gas company, Petrobras, alone being responsible for about 20 gigawatts that they want to design and develop in our country, and they are already having LiDAR devices in 5 different points of the Brazilian coast doing wind measurement to get additional details about the wind quality and the quality of the wind resources. So in this in-between process, we are working hard on bringing up additional enabling, the enabling conditions for that. And I would like to highlight that Brazil is also conducting a very strong and comprehensive process of marine spatial planning in the whole coast of Brazil. And we have, in addition to that, the approval of other laws that are being attracting different investors, such as the legal framework for low emissions hydrogen that will also unlock and make it possible the connections to offshore wind production to green hydrogen production. And we would like to say that Brazil believes in the energy transition. We can prove that it can happen. We departed from 74% of renewables in our electricity mix in 2014. And during the past 10 years, when we were committing to the Paris Agreement, during the past decade, we have reached 89% of renewables in our electricity mix, and wind was the key driver of this sectoral transformation. And in this, meanwhile, we also had our national industry being catapulted with these initiatives because we use the opportunity of wind development to also bring the industry development in Brazil, helping to diversify the value chain, the supply chain for onshore wind, and by having the support of our National Development Bank on reducing the financing costs for these projects in our country. So you can expect that Brazil is going to keep the model running in this sense so that we can advance and have offshore wind as part of our energy portfolio in the incoming years. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing those perspectives. Excuse me, and we're all really excited to be coming to Brazil later this year for COP30, so thank you for that. I just want to take a moment now to turn towards the industry and get some more of the industry perspective. And maybe if I can ask Mr. Morten Deerholm to share his perspectives with us. Morten is Group Senior Vice President for Marketing and Communications at Vestas. Morten, what do you make of what you've heard so far?
It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for these great meetings, and every time we meet, it seems we have new members joining, so it says something about the strength of this growing family, and also every time we meet new good news coming from the world of offshore. Of course, for me as a representative from industry, that gives me a lot of hope and ideas about the future being bright for this sector, because I think the last couple of years have been a couple of hard years of learnings from the industry sector here, and I think it's important that we take those learnings into Goa, and that's exactly why we are here and why we have this forum. And I think especially in just highlighting 3 areas: one is about realism, one is about discipline, and one is about collaboration. If you look at those learnings that at least we have experienced in the industry for the last couple of years, realism first in terms of how do we actually design our auction designs in a way where industry can see there is a business case to move on. We've hopefully all now seen the inability of concessionary payments or zero bids being able to deliver for the offshore industry. We need to find another pricing model that is realistic. And the same goes for risk sharing. We just had the recent example from Denmark. There was definitely a skewed risk towards the industry that made zero actually joining the auction in Denmark. And so we have to work our way through that realism. How do we actually get models that works? And my friend Tini here, I really agree with what you've said. This about having consistent volume. That's a realistic way of driving performance in this sector, rather than setting up high targets in some distant future. For us as an industry, this is exactly what we need to invest. This year-over-year volume that we can see coming online, it gives us security as investors and makes a business case work for us as an industry. When it comes to discipline, that's more me talking to the rest of the industry without pointing fingers. I mean, we have in the industry a need to focus on some more stability in the way we deliver supply chains. We have been out consistently saying, let's try and pause the arms race a little bit, also to my esteemed customers and developers that constantly try to put bigger and bigger turbines that are not even existing in the market yet into the auction designs, which makes everything worse for the industrial value chain that has to focus on standardization, modularization, and really effectivizing the way we deliver supply chains. And so that's a plea, and I think among the industry group also something that starts resonating across, because we have to deliver at the scale. Now we have the Brazil example. To deliver to that scale as an industrial value chain, we need to focus on really standardizing our components and making sure that we can repeat and build the same components to drive down the cost, and actually also deliver on localization targets. Then it doesn't work to come up with new turbines all the time and reinventing the entire industrial value chain. It really is about standardizing. We've taken some steps, also working within GWEC to look at standardization across. We've already seen some examples in the offshore now where we've started to standardize across the different companies on how we deliver turbines, offshore turbines, when it comes to the operation side. And I think we'll see more of that because we need to standardize also across the companies to a larger extent. And then when it comes to collaboration, private public collaboration, we also discussed this at the last GOA meeting in Korea. We like this regional approach when it comes to supply chain planning. Back to the realism, we've had a long time where every country had an idea about the industry being able to deliver 100% localization for their specific offshore plans. And I think that realism has started to kick in, that in order to deliver supply chains and the economic benefits we all want out of this sector, then regional collaboration is key. We've seen it with the North Sea collaboration among the 9 countries there, where we can spread out our investments for a larger subpart of the European offshore industry. We've seen it in the US with the 7-state collaboration, where they're now starting to work with industry to plan for supply chain across 7 states, rather than each state in the US thinking they can have the entire supply chain for themselves. And hopefully in Asia now we can see collaboration across with Japan, Korea, Taiwan, even Australia and China, where we can start planning supply chains in a larger sense rather than focus on one country. So I think those will be my words. I mean, realism is starting to kick in. I'm really excited to hear everything I hear in this forum. Discipline, that's mostly for us in the industry. We really need to step up to deliver on that scale. And then on the collaboration, that's why we have GOA. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for those comments. Without further ado, I want to now turn to Undersecretary Dr. Rowena Guevara, who's Undersecretary at the Department of Energy for the Philippines. And Undersecretary, I just wondered if you could share your perspective so far as a country who has done a lot to try and push forward offshore wind, and on the next steps that you would like to see in terms of collaboration from GOA in helping you achieve those aims.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to share what's going on in the Philippines on offshore wind. In 2019, we awarded the first service contract for offshore wind. Since then, we have awarded 92 service contracts totaling 60 gigawatts of offshore wind. We have a target of 2 targets. If we have the clean energy scenario 1, we are targeting 19 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2050. With the clean energy scenario 2, which is more aggressive, we're targeting 50 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2050. What is exciting in the Philippines is that we are targeting the first kilowatt hour of our offshore wind by 2028 first quarter. In fact, to make that happen, we have been in constant collaboration with our renewable energy developers to figure out the timing. We had to make sure that our policies and our timelines dovetail the needs of the industry. For example, they told us that they need to be doing financial closure on this date. And in order to do that, they need to be winners of a green energy auction. And that is the reason why we are scheduling the green energy auction for offshore wind by the third quarter of this year. Now, in terms of how we are being assisted by partners, I would like to thank the embassies of Norway, Denmark, and the UK who have been helping us in capacity building, not just for the government side, but also for the private sector. So for example, Denmark and Norway are helping us with the human resource development planning for offshore wind. The UK, they brought different government agencies related to permitting and consenting to the UK to explain how it all works together. And that is the reason why 2 months after returning from the trip from the UK, our president signed the executive order number 21, which requires all government agencies related to offshore wind to streamline the permitting and consenting process. Now, we know that offshore wind is going to be expensive. When we did our computation, it comes out to about 10 pesos for fixed bottom, 16 pesos per kilowatt hour for floating. Now, 10 pesos and 16 pesos, that's a huge amount of money when you compare it to our wholesale electricity spot market, which averages only 7 pesos per kilowatt hour. So the question now is, what kind of partnerships and collaborations do we need to do in order to get those numbers closer to wholesale electricity spot market? We are realistic. We've known in the past when we went into feed-in tariff that the initial cost is going to be very high. Feed-in tariff, for example, for solar was about 9 to 11 pesos in 2015. But in our recent green energy auction for solar, it is now down to 4 pesos 50 centavos. So that's less than half of the initial cost. So for offshore wind, we would like to be able to figure out how fast the numbers are going to drop as we offer auctions or we open more opportunities for our offshore wind developers to connect to the grid. What we have been fortunate to have in our partnerships, for example, with World Bank, they did the potential offshore wind assessment for the Philippines. They said, you have a potential of 178 gigawatts for offshore wind. And then World Bank followed that up with a plan for transmission. How many gigawatts should come in by this year, and so on and so forth, that can be supported by grid development. The ADB also made a study, a pre-feasibility study for offshore wind ports. And because of that study, last year, we finally had the Philippine Ports Authority agree to build 3 offshore wind ports just in time for what we call the 16 front-runner offshore wind development. So those 16, we expect some of them to be able to hit our target of first kilowatt hour by 2028. As you might notice from our example is that we are getting help as we need them along the way. I call it just-in-time assistance. So for example, our next hurdle is the transmission corridor and the buffer zones for the offshore wind developers. So we were fortunate that one of the companies, CIP, Copenhagen International Partners, volunteered to help us get training on how to design the buffer zones and the transmission corridors. So those 2 things, first, knowledge sharing or assistance just in time when we need the knowledge. And second, helping us figure out how to make offshore wind affordable. How do we get that 10 to 16 pesos to go below 7 pesos in a short amount of time. And with that, I thank you for listening to our sharing.
Thank you so much for those for laying down the gauntlet there, Under Secretary. I think we'll certainly follow up on some of those issues that you've raised there. I want to go now to Director General Kungok Young from the Renewable Energy Policy Bureau, Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy of South Korea, to share his perspectives on South Korea's efforts on offshore wind so far.
Well, nice to meet you. I'm Kyung-nok Chung. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this wonderful event, and congratulations on newcomers. And I'm learning a lot by listening to perspectives from different countries' cases and perspective from industries as well. And we have only 200 megawatts of offshore wind project in operation right now, in a sense, way lagging behind. But for the last 2 years, we had like more than 3.5 gigawatts of offshore wind auction, and we face a lot of challenges and criticisms and different opinions, even among our domestic stakeholders as well. Some of them, they say our regulation framework is not good enough. We have to wait. Some say our LSHO is too high for offshore wind project, just to wait. And another say community acceptance level isn't favorable, so we have to wait. By just waiting, we cannot achieve anything. That was our approach. So we just wanted to name our approach. It's just learning by doing. So we took a very decisive step. Last summer, we announced that we're gonna deploy more than 7 or 8 gigawatts of offshore wind project within 2 years. And maybe that could be a guideline for just a short term. If auctions were successful, we can announce maybe a 3 years plan or 4 years plan or 5 years plan. But as you already said, that just having a target in 2030 or 2040 isn't good enough. So we wanted to approach from now, for the 2 years, how many gigawatts of renewable energy we're gonna deploy. So that was the approach. And we face a lot of challenges, but if we are just waiting, we cannot achieve anything. So our approach could be like, why not now? Why not here? And that's our motto for deploying renewable energy. And okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, that was an excellent note to end it on. Why not now? Why not here? So thank you for that new motto for GOA, for the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. I just want to turn now back to industry to Mr. Glenn Barber from SSE. Glenn, again, I welcome you to share your perspectives on what's been shared so far from the government members of GOA.
Yeah, thank you, and hello everybody. Thanks to colleagues at ARENA and GOA for convening such a great event. The question I was lined up with was one of how expansion of offshore wind can maximise positive social and environmental outcomes, including job creation and protection of marine ecosystems. So I will speak to that, but some fascinating points raised already today. For those who don't know us, SSE is a UK headquartered electricity infrastructure company, and we've built some of the world's largest offshore wind farms to date, including Beatrice and Seagreen in Scotland. And we're in the process of building what will become the world's largest offshore wind farm at Dogger Bank. And just returning to the point my esteemed colleague from the Philippines raised on cost reduction, if it's a helpful anecdote, we started at £140 a megawatt hour at Beatrice. By the time we started building Dogger Bank, that was contracted at under £40. So that's the level of cost reduction. Clearly things have perhaps risen a little bit since then, but when you start to deploy at scale, you deliver those kinds of benefits. And we want to do much more. We have a significant pipeline of projects, including what would leapfrog Dogger Bank as the world's biggest at Berwick Bank, as well as interests in projects in the Netherlands and Japan as we expand internationally. But to the point of the question, we've also done a lot of work on this concept of the just transition, and we believe we were one of the first companies in the world to publish our own just transition strategy. And at the heart of that document is an acceptance that history tells you, while great opportunities can flow from industrial transitions like this one, there is potential for great injustice too. And we need to learn the lessons of the past, predict and preempt these impacts to ensure the costs and benefits of the transition are equitably spread, ultimately helping to prevent a disorderly transition to net zero by sharing the benefits of a decarbonised economy with everybody. And much of our work on this so far has focused on workers, particularly those moving from oil and gas roles or high carbon jobs to low carbon jobs in the future. And offshore wind clearly has great potential to deliver benefits here, given the location and nature of the projects. It's easy to say in theory, but I suppose the question is, does it happen in practice? And if you take our control room at Beatrice, the project I mentioned, 2/3 of the employees working there have come directly from oil and gas roles. And when we surveyed our entire company, we find that over 1/5 of our employees have previously worked in high carbon roles. And we can't really claim that that's a part of a deliberate strategy to go and recruit those people, but it does demonstrate that the skills are transferable, that the jobs we're offering are both attractive and in the right locations. And it also highlights the potential to do more if policymakers can focus on broader socio-economic value when designing auctions, etc., rather than simply lowest cost. But we'll need a more deliberate and coordinated approach to that going forward to give us better visibility of when and where those roles might materialise. Before closing, I just wanted to touch on the other point in the question around marine ecosystems, because this is another vital area for collaboration. As offshore wind projects are getting bigger, the days when projects could reasonably seek to compensate for their impacts on an individual basis are long gone. And increasingly what we need is interventions at the state level to put the right measures in place to offset their offshore wind development plans in the round. And in the UK context, we've seen plans to close sand eel fisheries as one such example. However, that can quickly get into difficult territory, and we've seen cross-border issues arising from that with an EU challenge on that decision because of the different competing interests on the seabed. So I think we can manage that, but it's going to require a far better degree of coordination and, dare I say, even coordinated development of marine spatial plans. It also requires departments within governments to be more joined up and clear about what's the overarching priority. Otherwise, decisions fall between the cracks, like those on marine compensation. So look, while it's clearly possible to deliver on our offshore wind targets while protecting biodiversity and the environment, as well as offering jobs, and it was great to hear the promise of 500,000 jobs, I think, from Brazil's journey on this. We'll need governments to collaborate with each other on it, and otherwise we'll find that projects like Berwick Bank that I mentioned just won't get off the ground and hold back the energy transition, which ultimately isn't in nature's interest either. But whether it's jobs or marine impacts, I'm confident the industry can and will navigate these trade-offs and leave a positive, lasting legacy. But as per the theme of the day, it's all about collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. Another good note to end your intervention on there. Some of the themes, I think I'll now pass over to Ms. Shamini Selvaratnam, who's the Associate Director for International Climate and Energy at Ocean Conservancy. Shamini, perhaps you want to address some of the themes there that were raised by Glenn in his intervention as well.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's great to be here back at IRENA and with friends and colleagues at the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. Let me just start off with going back to what Ben said. He's just left, but the urgency to scale up renewable energy is undeniable. And to meet the energy transition goals, we need to deploy all renewables at pace and scale that we have available right now. And while there are many paths to net zero, none are achievable without massive deployment of offshore wind. And contrary to misinformation, responsibly deployed offshore wind is a powerful solution to mitigate climate change while safeguarding ocean biodiversity. Integrating environmental safeguards from the outset, not as an afterthought though, is very critical in this process, and many of you have sort of talked about it and alluded to it. This requires both robust regulatory frameworks and industry commitments to projects with net positive impact on biodiversity impacts. And partnerships like GOA and many others are the backbone of success in offshore wind development, particularly as new emerging and developing countries are starting to deploy. And strategic collaboration between governments, industry, environmental organizations, and financial institutions will be essential for securing the social license and future-proofing projects. At COP29, in partnership with the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, we launched the NDC guidance tool to help countries set bold, actionable sectoral targets for offshore wind, aligned with 1.5C targets. Now, there are many countries around the table who have very large offshore wind goals, but not all of them have that as a sectoral target in your NDCs. And we highly recommend that this year being the NDC cycle year, that is something countries commit to doing, because NDCs can be a powerful tool in unlocking finance for offshore wind projects if they are structured to be investable. By embedding quantifiable offshore wind targets into NDCs, governments signal to investors and the private sector that there is long-term commitment and stability into offshore wind markets in their country. Ocean Conservancy is also an advisor to the high-level panel on sustainable ocean economy, and its recent report showed that offshore wind investments in it, $1 investment in offshore wind could result in a return of $2 to $17, depending on the type of energy that's being displaced and where the other costs that are being associated in the market. And that rate of return will continue to increase as the costs decline after the initial Pathfinder projects are done in the country. So it is also an economic imperative. Ocean Conservancy's work is global. We are an organization, however, that is based in the United States. So we have been asked, frequently since the new change in the administration in the US, will our approach change? And I will say I'm Canadian, but Ocean Conservancy as an organization has been working for 52 years protecting the ocean, with 26 Congresses, with 10 presidential administrations. They have done it before, and we will continue this work because offshore wind is a must. Win-win for energy and the environment. And together, I think that we should continue to work on a sustainable, just future, and we look forward to collaborating with all of you to make it happen. Simon will help me pass this around. This is the Offshore Wind NDC Guidance Tool document. You can download it. It's on the NDC Partnership website through the QR code, and we will share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that intervention. I'm now going to turn to Øyvind Johansen, who's Assistant Deputy General at the Ministry of Energy of Norway, to give a brief intervention.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me speak at the end of the session. Norway, we are a relatively newcomer to offshore wind, so it's actually very useful to hear a lot of the topics being raised. And I'm some comforted that we've probably done something right already, but we are hydropower-based power system, and we have 50 years of experience from oil and gas offshore, but I think offshore wind is an area where these two sectors kind of meet, but it's also very unique in its nature. So we spent some years developing a legal framework, financial mechanisms. So I'm fully agree with Belgium that you should need to take the necessary time for planning, and a little bit small finger pointing maybe to the industry, that I think it's also in the industry's interest that we plan well, get it right from the beginning, so we don't get any setbacks, which will then also hurt the industry. So it's not Vestas particular, but you know what I mean. And our government has very high ambitions. They want to award areas with a potential of 30 gigawatt by 2040. We had our first successful auction last year in March, a bottom fixed project of 1.4 gigawatt. And we have the plans for a new round in this year, actually in 2025, probably offshore, no, floating wind. So I think that's maybe an appropriate baby step to take. So we have this maybe biannual rounds, and you portion out this 30 gigawatts over a long period. And I think that's also good for the industry for planning, and you avoid the worst bottlenecks in the supply chain. So I think that's probably something you want as well. from the industry part. And the government has 4 key objectives. Of course, offshore wind obviously increases around renewable energy production, and we have a big electrification program in Norway, so we need more power, and it's cutting climate emissions. And by the government taking a very strong role in supporting this sector, we will hope to drive the technology and know-how, and also that cutting costs. We've seen 15, 20 years ago what's happened in the solar industry, driven by Germany, but today it's very cost effective. So that's key areas, and for this budget period, the government has proposed to the parliament to set aside about 3 billion euros for the support scheme. That will be spread over many years, but it's, of course, it's huge numbers, but we think it's necessary. And then another priority is to support floating offshore wind. The Norwegian continental shelf is very deep, so we see that's an area where you actually have to go into if we are reaching these targets, and it's more immature technology, but we also hope that can become a very interesting area, and this is also a very good bridge to our large supply industry, to oil and gas, where we see a lot of direct benefits, can transfer technology, and of course will also create business opportunities. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. We do have 2 brief interventions left. Can I invite Mr. Jakob Lauholst, who's the CEO of the Global Wind Organization, to give a brief intervention. Thank you.
I can, and I'll make it brief. Thank you. So yes, I am Jakob Lauholst. I'm from the GWO. GWO is the scheme for skilling and training of technicians in the wind industry. So we manage and maintain a scheme that's owned and led by the industry. So members are Vestas and SSE and other large employers in the wind industry. One of the key enablers for the energy transition is a skilled workforce. And one of the key enablers for bringing down cost is planning. Yes, I can. Okay. Is this better? All right. Okay, so we need skilled people to build and operate all of our renewable energy assets, and that's also true for offshore wind. A lot to build and less to operate. And GWO standardized training has been established about 7 years ago. Today, it's available in more than 50 countries, delivered by 600 training centers around the world. 185,000 people are being trained towards this scheme. So quite a growth, and so recognizable skills and training has never been as available as it is now, but it's not enough. We are far away from where we need to be, and what we're looking towards is a growing need for skilled workforce, and it's a little bit concerning when I read in this report about NDCs that only 12% of companies reporting are actually reporting also on their steps for making sure that there's enough human capital or human talent to build and operate what you plan to do. So here's a pledge or ask, look at planning, because planning helps us, but planning also for the practical steps for skilling up the young people that have to build this. Our forecasts show that the recruitment needs that we have globally are in the several hundred thousands. Most of those future several hundred thousand skilled technicians will be people that are young today and in high school. They don't have a lot of experience, and so they do need some training, and it's better for the industry and for the transition if when you have them at vocational education, if you have them in mechanical schools, electricians, that they come with recognizable skills for the industry. So we are also working with IRENA to give guidelines to governments about how to do those things. A significant proportion of our workforce will be transitioning workers from other industries, as the example given by SSE, but also transitioning workers from military services are super useful. They have the right skill sets, the right mindsets, and have some skills that we want to transition in.
I think we'll maybe have to leave it there.
So just thinking also the representatives from the Philippines, because we are here because at Goa in COP28 initiative was launched called Jobs for We that we're working with Irina on, and the Philippines and the government of Denmark and other governments to deliver some learning, some best practices and scenarios. So if anyone has got best practice scenarios or examples of how you're building in recognizable training into your programs, get in touch and we'd like to include it so that it can be an inspiration for others. Thank you.
Thank you. And then lastly, I just want to call on Mr. Yuval Lester, who's Head of Division Finance, Investment, Global Relations at OECD, for a brief intervention.
Yes, I'll try to make it very brief, and thank you for organizing this. We at the OECD working through our Clean Energy Finance and Investment Mobilization Program to help several emerging economies to unlock finance and investments in clean energy, including in offshore winds. We're working with countries like the Philippines and India, with close collaboration with the Global Offshore Wind Alliance and the government of Denmark. And talking about financing, offshore wind requires substantial upfront capital investments once operational. However, it benefits from predictable and low operating costs. This makes this cost of capital a decisive factor in overall economics. And there are various ways to overcome this, but one of the major areas that we want to focus on is creating the right enabling conditions with policy and regulatory frameworks, and we work with our partner countries on creating these enabling conditions. And this leads us and helps us to create a stable and predictable regulatory frameworks to reduce investor uncertainty and unlock finance. Competitive auctions has proven effective in allocating projects for development and laying the groundwork for market entry. Well-designed auctions can improve and incorporate non-price criteria like supply chains, resilience, and local economic benefits to diversify participation and maximize impact. Moreover, to some form of revenue stabilization can help attract long-term debt financing and reduce capital costs for offshore wind. And this would be pricing visibility for over 10 to 20 years, or at the very least, the right to sell production in a wholesale market and access to spot pricing. And so a key priority is to share knowledge and build capacity to unlock offshore wind financing in new markets. And in March this year, we will hold in the Philippines an OECD CEFIN program training on offshore wind financing, and we're welcoming all of you to participate in it. So I'll finish with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and we'll bring the session to a close now. Thank you to all the participants. Before we all drift away and before we get kicked out of the room, we'd like to take a photograph at the front here of a family photo. So please do come and join us at the front of the room. Thank you.